Welcome to Candid's 33rd year anniversary of our Network Days partner convening. So glad to have you all here. My name is Zora Zori. I'm Vice President of Influence at Candid. And our session today is focused around recalibrating for racial healing, which very nicely fits under our Network Days overarching theme of recalibrating towards equity. I think we've all heard it over and over again in our conversations in more intimate settings with our family members, in our professional lives, and certainly at conferences, that the last 3 years have really afforded an opportunity for reflection, reinvention, and just a lot of deep thinking about, for many of us, about how we think, what we feel, and how we show up, both as professionals and also as just human beings. I think as it relates to matters of race, many have advocated that we really accelerate progress by going from a simple acknowledgement that racial inequities exist to embedding more of a healing mentality in how we work and how we deliver through our work. And so today's session, Recalibrating with Racial Healing, brings together a very distinguished panel of guests, which I am so delighted, privileged, and honored to introduce, who will be talking about a variety of different things, beginning with more of a systems level of how healing is showing up in our sector, a more organizational level of how it's showing up in the way that we work on a daily basis, and then somewhat of an individual level of how it's shaping and reshaping who we are as professionals. So I'm really delighted to welcome Dr. Charlotte Llewellyn-Williams from the Clinton School Center on Community Philanthropy, Aaron Dorfman from the National Committee for Responsive Philanthropy, Marcus Walton from Grantmakers for Effective Organizations, and Arelis Diaz from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. Glad to see you all and so happy to have you all here. I've had the great privilege, along with one of my other colleagues, to be a part of a really terrific program, the first ever racial healing certification program, which we'll hear a little bit more about and get to know these amazing human beings. So we're just going to dive right in. If you're interested in the bios and some background on the organizations that our panelists represent, you can certainly dig into the agenda and look at the speaker bios. But we're just going to dive right in. We'll have an opportunity to entertain and curate a Q&A towards the end of this conversation. Comments are certainly welcome in the Pathable chat channel. We're going to dive in and ask a really big question and ask Marcus Walton, the President and CEO of GEO, to kick us off. So Marcus, you have sat at the intersection of so many grant makers and have worked in various other roles in the social sector. I'm really curious to know what your observations have been in terms of where racial healing lies on the journey towards a broader systems-wide equity, or just how that term is being embraced and talked about today in our sector.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Zora, I love being able to share this space with you and this group of colleagues. As you mentioned, it feels more like a family conversation. I'm looking around for the food, as a matter of fact. I gave some empanadas. Yeah, there you go. More than anything else, but also appreciate that we have 100 folks out there in the space that are joining the dinner table. And I love that analogy. I didn't plan that, but the metaphor matters because the time over the course of time, as you mentioned, just kind of entering in the space as a community foundation program officer after being an organizer for several years, and then moving through these networks of philanthropy support organizations back into the grant making role, and now serving at GEO. I've seen a trend of making the case, right? And so those earlier days of in this work of equity and healing was far afield. Right, only Kellogg Foundation and a handful of other groups were even mentioning this thing of healing, and they went deep into it too. I just happened to be one of those folks that nerded out on the information, but this idea of a racial hierarchy, right, a hierarchy of human value, and how that's playing out in our institutions was just a fringe conversation that was kept alive by a handful of folks who were just steadfast, and I don't even know how they were able to do it, but that certainly has changed. We moved from a need to convince the majority that this is a valuable area of focus to a state where it's become a little more obvious through perhaps day-to-day life, less theoretical and more individuals facing real challenges, whether they be economic, whether they be relational in nature, whether it's not having a clear pathway forward to a set of goals that maybe in the past seemed a little easier or more straightforward to achieve. And now there are all these questions and all these frameworks that have been produced over time to give us some insights and different ways to consider what's required for us to meet these goals that are related to the greater good, if you will. And so the way I frame it on, I love the recalibrating term, because it suggests that we're making an adjustment and that we're doing a comparison of standards. And so there used to be a standard. In order to recalibrate, we're suggesting that another standard is being explored or examined. And that moving from one way of being to another, let's call it a paradigm shift, is where I think healing, this notion of racial healing, takes on a very practical context in a way that maybe we've never been able to experience it before. So in short, there's a centering of humanity, if I can simplify what I just described, in our work that says, you know what, it's not okay to just be so strictly transactional, focusing on the contracts that bring us together, the projects, right? The results of those contracts and agreements, and then end the relationship there and move on to something else. Right? There's a shared lack of satisfaction and fulfillment that have moved us closer to something that we're starting to see show up in language that's shaped by transformation. And I'll offer as a working definition, transformation being operated from a shared set of values, a shared vision, and a shared sense of purpose. So it's not that transactional is bad. Transactional is just not the end goal. The end goal is to continue to move forward in these ways that respond to our shared sense of purpose and vision, and grounded in our values. And so it's an exciting time. I'll say it's a time where we're grappling with with a sense of a kind of existential set of questions that we haven't grappled with in the same way together. It's a collective and global conversation now that has to do with that awakening period over the past 3 years or so that you mentioned. And I'll just say that my sense is that racial healing will be critical in the short and long term, because we also desperately desire to move from awakening to reckoning, right? So it's not about what we know as much as who we know and how we're organizing ourselves to move forward with that shared sense of purpose for both our own well-being as well as the greater good, the societal well-being in mind.
I love it. And I think that's some really beautiful perspective, Marcus. And what I'm taking away from those comments are, the centering on humanity, the shared purpose, the global awakening. And more importantly, although I've mentioned earlier in the context of like what has united all of us in the last 3 years, the problems we've been facing have been ongoing for centuries and for a long period of time when we talk about inequities and we talk about the need for healing. And thank you so much for the setup and for mentioning Kellogg, because I would love to pivot over to Arelis and invite her to talk a little bit about the longstanding work that Kellogg has been doing as it relates to equity and healing, and just kind of where you are and what you're thinking and what investment looks like for an organization like yours that started well before this revelation that many have had just over the last 3 years.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Zora, Candid, and my colleagues, Marcus, and just great to be together. It's absolutely a little family reunion, no question about it. It is truly an honor to work for the Kellogg Foundation because of this commitment. And as Marcus had mentioned, our board made that commitment, and they said we will be an anti-racist organization before anti-racist was a thing. And so we have been working with grantees for a long time now that want to embrace that journey. One of the interesting pieces about this journey is that, so for many organizations, they couldn't even say racial equity. It could not even be said. They would feel much more comfortable, as many still do, in naming DI as an opportunity for themselves, but not necessarily connected to racial equity. The work that we have done, what's exciting after this last 3 years and the triple pandemic, is that it has brought to light, after George Floyd's murder, there was an awakening, as we've named. That awakening has brought some folks back, I think, have gone back to sleep a little bit, but we have definitely seen that there is more interest in this work, and absolutely some folks that are ready to work, right? To put their awakening into work, which is exciting. For the Kellogg Foundation, our racial equity is a two-strand approach. This is on systems transformation as well as racial healing. And I think that is unique about our foundation, is that it absolutely brings that racial healing into space, into places. And for many of maybe the participants, they may have heard about America Healing summits and the opportunities that we have in supporting racial healing practitioners, such as National Compadres Network, the Brotherhood of Elders, and others grantee that are really focused on healing. That body of work brought us to supporting our truth, racial healing and transformation. And it is that when we talk about the hierarchy of human value that is so prominent and prominent in our society, it is about ensuring that we can speak the truth about our past and the wrongs that have been created by individuals and by systems, by racism, and addressing that face on, right? And I think we've been doing a better job of it in more recently. And we have a lot of grantees that we are partnering with to be able to do this boldly, strongly, and courageously. For our strong and effective sector cohort, we had been giving them general operating support really proudly. And we said, we'd love to invite you into a journey to embrace and integrate and embed into your organization's racial equity. And we know that sometimes when there's a lot of competing priorities for organization, this topic gets put on the back burner. And so that's why we went into a programmatic opportunity to really dig into deeply on how to embrace it with boards. What type of professional development was necessary? How do we integrate it into the human resources practices, to really integrate it into our vendor searches and who we partner with, from conferences and convenings to everything in between. And so that was necessary. That was and that was part of what we had learned with our truth, racial healing, and transformation work. For transformation to happen, you have to absolutely prioritize racial equity and the practices, the reform, the transformation of those practices in organization. And it is not easy. This is really challenging work. when it's done well and when you want to go deep, and it takes special resources and opportunities for leadership, board leadership. Without our board deciding we were going to be an anti-racist organization, we would not be where we are right now. And so, and it's a continuous process. We are still on our journey, and we continuously try to integrate and embed for our racial equity and our racial healing. So what's been exciting is that the Strong and Effective Sector cohort took a lot of time to continue the metaphor, Marcus. We invited the Strong and Effective Sector group into this fellowship meal, right? Are you ready to enter this space? In our home, we make rice and beans and chicken fricassee and empanadas. And some people say, well, I'd rather eat meat and potatoes. There's nothing wrong with eating meat and potatoes, but in our house, you're going to eat rice and beans and chicken fricassee and empanadas, right? And if you want to join us, that's fantastic. But you can also decline that invitation and say, nope, I'm not comfortable with everything that you've mentioned. I can't even say it. All right, that's okay. That was a type of invitation that we made to the Strong and Effective Sector. We gave them 3 days of examples of speakers that actually spoke about it, and then said, are you willing to join us in this invitation? What emerged from that was really deep thinking from a lot of our organizations, Candid, GEO, NCRP, all of the organizations that are here. And after George Floyd, many of these organizations said, all right, we've done racial equity. We need more support around racial healing. When we first mentioned it, I think some folks were just not sure what it meant for their organizations. But after that, it was clear that it was necessary, and the leaders wanted more support in building their muscle around how to bring that thread, that strand into their organization. So what we were able to do was think through, we wanted to professionalize a certificate program for leaders that would be able to then really integrate racial healing. Racial healing is a process. It really restores individuals. And we think about what we have gone through in the last 3 years as a society. We need restoration. We need to restore our communities, our individuals, our families to wholeness, and repair the damage that has been caused by racism, to transform our society's structures, to be able to bring and affirm individuals and bring back the inherent value of our within our society, of our people. And so this process, this knowledge, this opportunity for people to speak their truth, to be able to share in safe spaces, to share their truth, to share how systemic racism has harmed them, has hurt their organizations. And what we're trying to do is be able to restore philanthropy. Philanthropy is a little bit of an oxymoron when it comes to the truth and bringing out the truth, because much of philanthropy, the wealth that philanthropy is built on is because of the injustices that have happened in our society. Mm-hmm. So this racial healing certificate program is to build the capacity of individuals that have the desire, the will to not just transform themselves and to be able to do this work for themselves and reflect internally, but to do the work for their organizations, to do the work for the field of philanthropy, and be a part of the transformation that philanthropy needs to be a part of. So that's what's exciting about this racial healing certificate program that we have, that is grounded on our truth, racial healing, and transformation framework. So it's a continuous building up of our work as a foundation from our policy, board policy shift to all the way to supporting organizations and transforming communities so that we can make lives better for children, families.
I love that. Thank you so much, Aurelis. I want to acknowledge and also applaud not just your passion, but the level of humility that comes across in your messaging as an organization that's been doing this and supporting equity and healing for much longer than a lot of other philanthropy-focused organizations. To still hear you say we're learning and growing and listening and evolving, I think means a lot. I've heard from both you and Marcus. I'm going to set up Charlotte, Dr. Williams in just a moment, this framing of transformation. And because I'm also a participant of this racial healing program, I take notes every single time this group gets together for Healing Fridays. So there's one thing, actually, the very first quote I wrote this morning and going through my months long log of notes is one of our colleagues in one of our sessions said, change is not the answer, transformation is, because once you become a butterfly, you can never go back. And I thought that was really beautiful and it stuck with me. And so be a butterfly as my takeaway from that. So speaking of these butterflies and these great nuggets of wisdom that we've learned through the racial healing program, Dr. Williams, would love to hear from you on what the Clinton Center on Philanthropy is doing.
Well, thank you, Zora, and thank you, Aurelis and Marcus, for really providing all of the context and the background and the insight about the origins of the first National Racial Healing Certification Program. And speaking as myself, not the University of Arkansas, the Clinton School Center on Community Philanthropy, it has been a journey of sticking and staying the course of doing our work of community philanthropy around our core values of healing, equity, and justice. So for us, our healing work goes all the way back to 2008, where we were a partner along with the W.K. Kellogg Foundation as part of the America Healing Initiative, and our early days of convenings around racial healing in community and across the region. And then in 2009, we announced our first cohort of racial healing visiting scholars and residents. And since that time, we have hosted over 33 scholars to be a part of this work, coming in and doing residency and publishing and writing around racial healing as a strategy for driving social change. And so around 2013, we hosted our first national conference on community philanthropy and racial healing. And so since that time, fast forward to now, 2020, we were honored when the W.K. Kellogg Foundation called on us to partner with them in establishing the first certification program in racial healing as a way of credentialing the leaders who were ready, as Aurelis said, for that next level learning in racial healing, so that we could provide a micro-credentialing opportunity for them in this very targeted area of experience, applied learning, and peer learning, which is service for us in this very targeted area of racial healing. So what it has taken has been persistence and being bold in integrating racial healing across all of the center's work. Our practice of community philanthropy, in the classroom of teaching community philanthropy and racial healing, building the scholarship of racial healing as evidence of this being a strategy for transforming how we heal, not just individually. It starts with us, but it doesn't end with us. It really has to move into systems and structures and government, because we live in spaces and places, and we rely on our structures and our systems and services for employment. So we need to bring them alongside with racial healing. So for us, it has really been a journey. It has been an honor, but this area of micro-credentialing is something that has really taken root. Lots of directors and executives and leaders are looking for an opportunity to have an abbreviated period of time, to have focused learning and experience and applied knowledge acquisition, so that they can walk away with credentials to professionalize, as Aurelia says. And for us, it is credentials around this very targeted space of racial healing, and how that then is applied to transforming organizations, how they do their work, how they build their leaders, how they inform their advisories in a way that we can really move humanity towards creating the kind of environments and neighborhoods and communities that we all want to live in, right? And how we transform that across different disciplines, whether you're a banker, a social worker, an attorney, an executive with a nonprofit organization. Bringing the competency of racial healing benefits all of us in a way that supports transformation.
Thank you, Charlotte. And I think what's been really interesting about this experience is the ability to also co-create and lend value and thoughts around what healing means based on the specific cohort and the personalities and the stories and experiences that are coming together. So thank you to the Clinton School and Community Philanthropy and for Kellogg for making that happen. Erin, I miss you and I want to hear your voice. So I have like a two-part question for you. One, a quick reaction on just Healing Fridays and the Racial Healing Certification Program. And then also, I want to talk a little bit about NCRP's work, because your organization does tremendous work in terms of really surfacing provocative dialogue around topics that most in the sector would be kind of afraid to have or a little timid to have. So I'm just curious to which extent like healing is showing up in some of that work. So a quick reaction to what Charlotte and Aurelis and Marcus shared, and then your perspective on NCRP and what you're hearing.
Yeah, thanks, Zora. It's great to be with you all today, and always such great wisdom coming from Marcus and Aurelis and Charlotte and you. You know, when I started the Racial Healing Certification Program, I was a bit of a skeptic. I've always been focused on justice and building a fair and just and equitable society. And I really wasn't quite sure what role racial healing had in getting to justice. And what I've come to realize through the many months of this program is that healing is really necessary if we are going to build the kind of fair, just, and equitable society that many of us want. There's a lot of healing that has to happen before that, before we can get to that place. And so the work at the National Committee for Responsive Philanthropy focuses on, I think, of necessary ingredient and precursor to the healing. And that's the truth telling, right? People have to honestly wrestle with and reckon with the harm that they have caused to others in our society based on this made up racial hierarchy that we've instituted. People have to wrestle with that. And especially in philanthropy, where virtually every single fortune that has been built, that is now being given away philanthropically, was built on the backs of stolen land and stolen labor. And there's a lot of harm that has been done. And we've got to talk about that. And we've got to tell the truth if we can get to that next step to the healing. So we think about our organization as part of an ecosystem of philanthropic sector organizations that can get us there. But we don't all play the same roles. So here's an example of how that plays out. Little over 2 years ago, a couple of months after the murder of George Floyd, a lot of our Black-led nonprofit members, we have both nonprofit members and foundation members, they came to us and said, we're hurting. The community foundations have been ignoring Black communities. They're not supporting us. We're in this moment of crisis. They still don't see us, and nobody's talking about that. So we produced a report called Black Funding Denied. That was a truth-telling exercise about how little support actually goes from some of the largest community foundations in the country for the intentional benefit of Black communities in their service areas. And that was really painful. Like, a lot of the community foundations felt they were doing better than what the data said, wanted to be doing better. But the report really helped folks sort of wrestle with an uncomfortable truth. But then the organization that sort of told the truth and caused them to be uncomfortable, we can't really be the ones that help them do the healing and take the next step. So we rely on our peers and our colleagues in the field. So a lot of those community foundations went to ABFI to figure out how to get better at supporting Black communities. And 2 years later, you see market improvements from about half of the community foundations that we featured with that research. They're doing better. Are they doing enough yet? No, but they have gotten better. So I think that ecosystem idea is important, and the truth telling is important. You can't gloss over that. And we're starting a new initiative now that I'm really excited about called the Reckoning Initiative, where we're examining some large foundations and how their wealth was created and to what extent the wealth was created by harming and exploiting Black people. And then, there will be more steps after this report comes out in another 11 months or so, where the healing needs to take place. But first, you've got to really wrestle with the uncomfortable truths. So that's what we're trying to do with our work.
That's terrific, Aaron. Thank you so much. And I know that that comes with a lot of responsibility and a lot of pressure. So definitely appreciate all that NCRP and organizations like yours are doing. So folks, thank you, Aurelis. I know you have to jump to a board meeting. Thank you so much for being here. We have about 10 minutes left and a couple of questions in the chat. I'll invite others who have questions to also pop them in the chat on the Pathable site. And then I also want to kind of prompt our panelists here that will conclude with a virtual gift that each of you are going to offer our audience today. So David, if you can help me with questions from the Q&A, what's coming in?
Absolutely, Zora. Well, what you've all described here sounds like such a wonderful transformative experience that folks in the chat are asking how they can take part in the program themselves if they were interested in also getting the value of that experience for themselves.
Well, I'll respond. This very first class was an invitation-only course group that we selected initially. But by all means, our intention is to make it the kind of a certification opportunity where folks can apply and engage based on their interest and their availability. So my response to that would be to stay tuned, to keep an eye out on the work of the University of Arkansas Clinton School Center on Community Philanthropy, because we're being very open in distributing the studies, the impact, and the outcome of the certification program as it continues to grow, as it continues to build out. As we do that, there'll be more opportunities for people to engage as cohort 2, cohort 3, in the context of additional learning, next level learning. The second thing I would say would be to seek support internally from your own organization and your board to make certain that they are open to this idea of you committing 18 months to 2 years in a certification program, because as Zora and Aaron has said, we do call on the individuals to bring their whole self to the space of what we have coined our Healing Fridays, our different sessions. We have an amazing faculty of racial healing faculty scholars who have been part of the Scholar in Residence Initiative with the center. They've been part of the SCORE group of the Kellogg Foundation, and they're now serving as the faculty within the Racial Healing Certification Program. So follow their work. These are people that you hear their names. You know, Dr. David Williams at Harvard University, John Powell out of Berkeley. There are just a host of individuals that are out there in the mainstream. So keeping contact with them and their work is also a way to engage in being a part of a future cohort.
Thank you. David, I think there's one more.
There's another one. Yeah, thank you, Charlotte, for that. Our next question is, can you speak more about operationalizing this work? What are some examples of practices and policies that support a transformation within an organization from a focus on equity to a focus on healing?
You want to do that one, Aaron? You want to start?
Sure. You know, one of the things that we've come to realize is we've got to create more space for people to heal in their own lives. And, you know, I'm sort of a old school, work around the clock kind of nonprofit leader from an older generation. And it really doesn't create much space for people to heal from their own past harms and traumas. And having a truly multiracial team that, you know, comes from the communities that we are advocating for and with is really important to me. And if we want to create space for folks on our team to be fully authentic, we've just had to sort of create more realistic work culture, less of a white supremacy work culture, and that, you know, comes in the form of additional days off and certain days with no Zoom meetings, and then just a culture of, even like at staff retreats, like just not packing the meetings from, you know, 8 a.m. till 8 p.m., but like creating a lot more downtime for people to forge authentic relationships with each other. Those are some of the things that we've put in place over the last few years.
Yeah, thank you. And I trusted you would go there, Aaron. So thank you. That's the benefit of this kind of work together too. You really start to know each other and operate as a team. And so the way I want to add to what Aaron mentioned, because we certainly have done that at Grantmakers for Effective Organizations, is timing. You know, if I were to look at one particular theme and say, like, what is it that we have changed the most, or that the theme around which I have adapted the most, is looking at timelines, right? Similar to Aaron, I came up in a different generation where, you know, we were told to just kind of figure it out, you know, pay attention, look for your opportunity, and you just kind of outwork the next person. Well, now I'm appreciating that timelines can be negotiated. Certainly reconciliation, the grounds for recovery, like that personal recovery that we're talking about, it can't be artificially imposed, right? And so we did a lot of observing. Quite frankly, I had to create flexibility within the organization. It was so well designed that to deviate from any of the processes would cause a breakdown in some ways. And so there was a kind of structural rigidity that needed to be revisited. And guess what? When you do that, you have to depend on individuals to make commitments and follow through on those, right? That's the purpose of having such a rigid set of policies and practices, is to ensure reliability and replicable results over the course of time. So all of that to say is we too had to do some internal work. We did alignment sessions. And so what that meant was ensuring that we had a shared understanding of everyone's experience within the organization. We had a consultant, Cheryl Petty from Movement Tapestries, come in and really work with the entire organization, from the person with the least amount of experience, as well as all the way up into my role. And then we, for the sake of transparency, in the same way that Aaron mentioned, we talked about recommendations. We explored possibilities and got, talk about some truth telling. Like, there were just some commitments that folks needed to make. There were some roles that we needed to revisit, and we're still, and it's ongoing. So we're still not there, but just doing that. And then we did that at the board level as well. So Gio has both gone through a transformation process on the staff and board level together. And now moving forward, we're looking at our strategic planning with that same sense of transformation being the anchor for our work, right? Change itself being central to how we support the evolution of the field and how we consider effectiveness when it comes to grant making practices. So just a couple of thoughts there.
Well, I think those are really some beautiful thoughts. Thank you, Marcus and Aaron. And I think what I'll add to that also is where leadership spends their time also signifies where there's priority in an organization. So the president and CEO of NCRP and the president and CEO of GEO are showing up at these kinds of convenings and making commitments to talk about these important topics. And so I think it's incredibly valuable. We have just 3 minutes left. And Erin, I'm going to ping you quickly because the last question from our audience is for you. And then I'm going to move over to Charlotte to help close us out with her gift. And we'll do a round robin for that. So Erin, I believe you mentioned the Reckoning Initiative. How will the foundations be chosen for the inaugural Reckoning Initiative? And that was you, right? I'm looking for
Yeah.
Good. And then the rest of the question is, will the research be independently conducted, or are these organizations willingly sharing the information because of shifting funding priorities?
So we're doing the pilot project with DMV, DC area funders. Some of them will voluntarily collaborate with us, and some we expect will not. And we're trying to choose some of the largest funders in this region to examine, but also some where the wealth creation caused the most harm, even if that philanthropy isn't the one of the largest in the area. So it'll be sort of a iterative process to narrow our list down to about 10 that we're going to look at in depth. And then if it goes well, and if things are learned from this project, we may export it to other cities and regions in the coming years.
Great. Well, rooting for you and your team's work, Erin, with that. So let's close this out with a virtual gift of some words of wisdom. Charlotte, let's hear.
Thank you, Zora. Thank you to all my colleagues on this incredible panel. I think my virtual gift to everyone that's attending, everyone that's listening in, would be to embrace racial healing in a bigger, broader way than you probably have historically thought about it, to really begin to think about and embrace racial healing as a discipline in and of itself. It begins as an experience internally, but it doesn't end there. It really has to move out to the sector and to systems and structures. It reminds me of criminal justice. Years ago, criminal justice was not a discipline. But in like the 80s, the US Justice Department began funding and supporting training and programs in criminal justice. And now you can get a PhD in criminal justice. Right. And so we're really on the cusp of looking at racial healing as burgeoning into a discipline in a way that people can be credentialed, in a way that it can be a part of all kinds of sectors across all different disciplines of society.
Beautiful. Marcus, what about you? What's your gift at the dinner table?
Bravery. That this work takes courage. That is not a job. The reason it matters is because it enhances not only your quality of life, but has the potential to transform the quality of life in communities in a way that has been desired for multiple generations. And it puts love back into the work, joy back into the work, makes it central to the work. It's always been there. We have prioritized it in different ways for different reasons, but there's nothing more generative, more exhilarating than connecting with colleagues and advancing this work. We cannot do it alone. We cannot advance transformation in isolation of others. It defeats the purpose. And so for those of you who are craving connection and looking for fulfillment, my experience has demonstrated that it absolutely lies in this really challenging work, but it's doable.
Pretty brave. Thank you. Erin.
My gift is my favorite piece recently by Crystal Haling in Inside Philanthropy called "Hey Philanthropy, Division Isn't Our Biggest Problem." And I think if we think about healing, we make a mistake if we think that's just a nice fuzzy concept. And so here's one quote from that piece. "Because I am a Black woman, absolutely no one in my family reminisces fondly about nicer yesteryears in America. So a return to civility at the cost of truth-telling escapes me. I don't long for some fantastical time when in back rooms, without women and with whiskey, laws were hashed out. There has never been a time when we got a seat at the self-determination table by being sweet and docile. Redressing injustice requires agitation. Change generates friction. She's just one of the brilliant thinkers in our field right now. And so those who are on this call, if you're not following Crystal on all the platforms, you should be. That's my
Thank you.
gift.
Thank you. And that's absolutely beautiful. With Aurelis not here, one thing I just want to pull out from all the golden nuggets she shared is she talked about how over the years, she's seen a lot of us go from awakening to going back to sleep. So just kind of on her behalf, maybe her gift, if she were here, was to tell us not to go back to sleep. Thank you all so much, Erin, Marcus, Charlotte. Much love and much healing. Appreciate it. Take care,
Thank you.
everyone.